What is your never interrupt an enemy while they are making a mistake moment? I was accused by a neighbor of reversing out my drive and hitting his car. He gave me the date and time I had allegedly done it, and pointed to a small scrape on my car that supposedly matched perfectly the location of the dent on his. This was 7 weeks after the alleged event. By the way, I said it wasn't me. I told him to contact his insurance and we'd see what they said. Few weeks later I get a letter from my insurance asking what had happened, to which I responded with the date I had bought my car and updated my insurance. 2 weeks after the supposed bump, he never spoke to me again, but I used to give him a cheery wave every time I saw him glowering at his window. Years ago I worked extremely hard on preparing a presentation for a tech conference. It would be my first speaking gig. I was nervous AF. I practiced. I refined. I got advice. I practiced some more. My manager was generally a nasty woman, but she was supportive of this, though she never once saw or heard my presentation. We traveled to Vegas. It turns out there was a far greater demand than they expected, so they moved us to the main stage room. They were expecting about 500 plus walk-ins. I was 10x nervous AF. Well, immediately prior to the start, she noticed a very well-known media person and their photographer sitting in the front row. She got all excited and insisted that she was going to co-deliver it. She even went so far as to put her name on title slide. So, I of course was fuming. We go on stage. She does a decent intro, and then I starting. She keeps interrupting, so I just let her run with it. It reminded me of a morning show. A bunch of people, with overwhelmingly fake smiles talking over each other. This was a deeply technical topic with a live demo. She fumbled each slide worse than the next, and then she got to the live demo slide and froze. I had the wherewithal to let her die. It was gloriously brutal. We had a, let's say, confrontation after. I left within 2 to 3 months. She got fired shortly after. Oh, and the media people she was prancing for left immediately before the start. I think they were just sitting there from the prior session. Perfect. In a meeting with my project manager who has not been in the office or worked a proper full day for months, she has increasingly been annoyed by people bypassing her to get things done by telling me and her other direct reports what to do. I was about to answer a question for stakeholders. She told me to let her speak 1 sentence and will let me have my bit. I did as I was told, and she told the stakeholder a completely wrong thing about the system we were handling and made a complete fool out of herself. She got sacked this month. Roommate's ex abandons their vehicle in front of my house. I tell them to please move it or I will have it towed. Vehicle suddenly has 2 flat tires. EX files police report claiming my roommate and I had slashed their tires. Waited until X made their statement to the police about how we had slashed their tires and that is why they couldn't move his vehicle and file the claim against us in small claims court. Provided police and the court copies my and our neighbor's doorcam footage showing the X arriving in the middle of the night to slash their own tires. Cherry on top, X shows up in court wearing the same shirt as in the videos. Guy stole a presentation from me. This is 25 years ago. We hated each other. When he started presenting, I realized I had made a huge error. Didn't say anything. Let him get through it. Asked him about the error. He couldn't answer. This was in front of Q. Got fired. Not for just that. He was an overall douche. This was before everyone was on PCS. Had 1 printer in 1 room. I let the lady who changed lanes into me run her mouth about how I rear-ended her before pulling the cop aside to show him my dashcam footage. When a coworker who I hated got fired a few weeks after I decided to stop fixing his mistakes even if it impacted a client. On the one hand, you don't want to be a snitch, but on the other hand, you really shouldn't cover up other people's stupidity. Had a coworker who should have been fired a year earlier, but I kept stepping in. On at least 2 occasions I told myself that I had to shield the job from liability when his personal and professional incompetence got people physically hurt. So I stepped in and smoothed things out, instead of letting him dig his own grave. When he eventually got fired, it took him 6 months to forget my phone number. Don't cover for stupid kids. I was a lead developer in a small company producing IoT devices. My manager hired his friend from his previous company, a guy who was super arrogant and knew everything better. Theoretically, my opinion on the development of the project should be decisive, but neither my manager nor his buddy cared about it. I tried to talk to the manager about the problems with the new colleague, but he brushed me off. The new guy, being so brilliant, was given one important component of the system to do. Of course, he made it clear that he didn't need any help from me. Weeks and months passed. In the meetings, his component was always in the last phase of testing, but I had access to the Git repository, and I saw how messy it was. No one asked me for my opinion, so I didn't say anything. I waited. The deadline has come, the release of the product, and of course nothing works. Higher management became interested in the case, and my manager could only avoid being fired in one way. He fired his buddy. A few weeks later, I left the company. That was over a year ago, and as far as I know, the product still hasn't hit the market. During my very long and exhausting divorce, my ex-husband kept insisting he was ready to settle. We would schedule a conference with my lawyer and I, and then push papers around the table for 2 hours. He would just argue over petty details rather than actually discuss anything. This happened a few times. I was incredibly frustrated because I genuinely walked into this wanting to compromise so it would be over quickly. But that was never an option. Note that I hired a lawyer and he did not. He was convinced he could do it on his own better. So after a few rounds of this, I got the impression that he was trying to waste my money until I could no longer retain my lawyer, and then he thought he would have the upper hand. I made less than half of what he did at the time, and my lawyer's retainer fee wiped out my entire savings, so it was a very real concern. My suspicions were confirmed when one day, as we were walking out of my lawyer's office, he told me this, word for word, while chuckling. I passed this on to my lawyer, who actually cackled and told me let him. It was then that I learned that we were 6 months out from being married 10 years, and at that point, I would be entitled to a sizable part of his pension upon retirement. She let him play his games for 6 more months without saying a word, and then finally took our case before a judge 5 days after our 10-year anniversary. Not only did I get part of his pension, but she also got the judge to order him to pay almost all of my lawyer's fees. The beauty of it was that it 100% his fault for playing games. Not my story. But several years ago, my older brother was fighting for custody of his son with his ex-wife. As the first custody hearing date approached, they were exchanging pleasantries over text, and my brother ended up saying something along the lines of, "I'm not continuing this conversation. I will see you on the 15th. The ex-wife told him, "The hearing is on the 25th, dumbass." So of course, instead of correcting her, my brother just allowed her to keep thinking it was the wrong date, and she missed the first hearing entirely. It became the first of many mistakes she made in the court system that eventually led to my brother and the woman who is now his second wife winning full custody of his son. I have my own custody battle. When I split with my ex-wife, one of the main reasons she gave for me not being able to spend time with my daughter was because she was convinced I was going to take her to my parents' house, and my mom liked to smoke only cigarettes. But still, in the house, we arrived in court, and I met her and her lawyer in the reception area. The three of us struck up a conversation, mostly about the case, and in the course of that conversation, the fact that my mom had passed away a month earlier happened to come up. The look on her lawyer's face. It was clear this was the first time she'd heard about my mom passing. My ex-wife, who was very aware of it, hadn't mentioned it to her. And this was obviously quite a vital part in their whole argument. Within 30 minutes, her lawyer had drafted an agreement about how we'd share custody of my daughter. I signed it, and we got the judge to effectively rubber stamp it for us. I was doing a mortgage for a French guy in Miami Beach that had a French realtor. Even though both were completely fluent in English, she frequently did asides in French, having no idea I spoke the language. When they settled on a property and we were riding the elevator down from the condo, she told him that, "Look, these guys are scumbags, and they're going to screw you over, and I have a much better person that you can work with, even though the way foreign investment works is identical throughout the state." Towards the end of the ride, I say to the guy in fluent French that we would be happy to compare our proposal with whatever her people could come up with and it's his choice. Certainly, we would like to work with him on this and any future investments. He starts laughing his ass off. And she was completely mortified. He went with us and fired her as his agent. On the spot. I'm working on a job site and the architect is there one day. I've been given some light fixtures for the sconces in a leasing office lobby. The fixtures are meant to be hung from a ceiling, they can't be installed on a wall. I attempt to convey this to the architect, but he brushes me off and just tells me to follow the prints. I turn to the apprentice and say, "Well, you heard the man. Put them up." A bit later, we hear the crashing of glass. The architect asks what was that. I said, "Your light fixture," as I picked up a broom and dustpan to go clean up. When I was a teenager, a cousin of mine, Jenny, had a fight with her mom, Jackie. The fight was so intense that Jackie beat Jenny severely. So she called mom and dad asking for help and asked to live here for a while. At the time that sounded horrifying, but we quickly learned that Jenny was full of fucking shit. Jenny was a drama queen, loved to stir up trouble, lied constantly about basically everything, and Jackie never laid a hand on her. We had heard rumors, but dismissed them and believed her. Until one incident. Mom always kept a few frozen pies in the freezer, just in case company came over. Jenny took a pie from the freezer one day, ate the entire damn thing, and when Mom came home, she got angry because those pies were for company. She asked Jenny who ate the pie and she said, "I did." She yells for me. I come into the kitchen. She asks if I ate the pie. I said no, and get yelled at for eating the pie. Jenny then proceeds to launch into telling this overly elaborate tale about how I took the pie and ate it just to get her in trouble. She went on for like 3 minutes and Mom just kept getting angrier and angrier at me. Well, I couldn't help grin like a madman. 3 minutes later she finished her story and I point something out. It was a coconut cream pie she ate. I despise coconut. I hate it and will never eat it. Mom knew this and the realization hits her. Jenny gets a look of horror in her face. She got grounded for a month. The look of both of them is seared in my mind. Makes me smile when I think of it. The funny thing is, she tried it again 2 months later, this time eating a chocolate cream pie, but Mom didn't believe her. I worked in a countrywide company and needed something done by a peer in another office. She was very uncooperative and was arguing with me that she should not do what I was asking because it was not the correct procedure. It was, in fact, the correct procedure as per my boss who was her boss, but before I could tell her where I had gotten my instructions, she took it upon herself to send me a very condescending email, saying her boss and mine. She was clearly trying to put me on the spot for being wrong. I just waited until both her boss and mine told her that I was right, and I was just sitting there thinking, why are you making this so hard on yourself, girl? As I was being fired from a job, the district manager requested we record the conversation. He thought I was gonna be very upset, so I obliged. Then when he started to tell me why I was being fired, he started with, "You are gonna be graduating college soon, and we want to make sure we get ahead of you leaving us." I very calmly asked he send me the recording right after he said that. Then later that day I called a lawyer. I now have no student loan debt. Edit. To give context, I was able to win litigation due to breach of contract. I don't feel like the internet is the right place to go into further detail. I reminded my ex-wife the divorce court was the next day and was invited to get fucked. So I went by myself. She failed to appear and pissed of the judge so that he asked what would be my desired outcome for assets and custody of the kids. He wrote down whatever I wanted and I could hear her screams when she read the orders from 3,500 kilometers away. My ex-coworker was pausing, he was using, "I have a baby so I need certain shifts more." But that didn't matter if he randomly decided to get wasted on alcohol and white powder. He would call me in the middle of the night to cover his morning shift, etc., etc. And I would cover his shift, and yet, when I needed him to cover my shift, which I would ask him days, even weeks in advance, he would pull "I have a baby" card. Christmas season comes and I ask him if I can take 31st of December morning shift so I can spend New Year's evening with my boyfriend, go somewhere, celebrate, etc. He got almost mad because I asked. His words were, no, I have a baby. It's his first New Year's Eve. I have to spend it with him and wife. Fine. Whatever. And then night of 30th comes. I was awake at 2 a.m., gaming or watching Netflix. I felt my phone vibrate, and look who it is. My coworker who is wasted somewhere and needs his morning shift cover. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and in my drawer. I didn't answer. Next morning, I had 50 missed calls from him, few from other coworker and 10-ish from my boss. He didn't show up for work. He got fired that day. Work environment became so much healthier. Our friend group had one guy had personally cut off because he was a terrible drunk. Another friend of mine was having a cookout and decided to invite the guy had cut off despite me saying he was going to do some stupid shit. Fast forward into 2 hours into the cookout, the friend I had cut off from my life got drunk and decided it'd be funny to sucker punch a guy with Aspergers. Everyone was telling him how big of a piece of shit thing that was to do, but he laughed and shrugged and played it off as no big deal, as the Aspergers guy was holding back tears. I didn't have to do a fucking thing. He showed everyone who he was. Everyone stopped fucking with him. After that, good riddance. My wife was a school teacher with 20 years under her belt. She was paired with a co-teacher for what we used to call the special ed students. Wife and co-teacher did not get along. It got to the point where wife and co-teacher and their respective bosses were sent to mandated mediation. Near the end of the mediation session, co-teacher asks the mediator, so what's the next step if this doesn't work? Turns out, the next step is the one without tenure gets let go. 10 years ago I had a coworker everyone found pretty annoying. She was an idiot who thought she knew better than everyone else and would get offended at every opportunity. She took something I said the wrong way one day and got really upset, and I just didn't say anything. I would not indulge her insanity, so she quit, grabbed her stuff and walked out on a job she'd had for years. No one spoke a word to stop her. I've written about this before, but my half-sister moved in with my ex-husband the day I moved out. They swore they weren't sleeping together. I didn't ask. They told me without prompting. So I saw no reason to tell me ex that my sister had herpes. After all, they said they weren't sleeping together. Guess who was on Voltrex 2 months after the divorce? My village has a lot of shops in the center with a number of flats above the shops. A new developer arrived, bought up all the properties and raised the rent ridiculously high on a 10-year contract for force all the small businesses and renters out. His idea was to redevelop the face of the village into a modern metro-type area. The problem was he's forced out every business, but no one signed up for his new leases. More than half the village shops are empty and it's an eyesore. All the businesses have gone to the big shopping centers, so no investors want any part of it. He's now ran out of money and can't build his metro douche revamp anymore and is having to sell to recoup his lost rental earnings. I'd asked our very macho and loud manager for a raise, and he went on a 10-minute rant about how kids these days thought there was money lying around just because we worked in a luxury dealership. Lots of condescending sweethearts and honeys thrown in for the fun little misogynist cherry on top. He got so loud and frothy I shut down a bit, but my face stayed blank. When he noticed I wasn't cowering or seemed to change my mind, he started offering a marginal raise. I reflexively lifted one eyebrow at the ridiculousness of it all, and he sighed and went up significantly, got a solid raise, a better position, and somehow his respect for the rest of my time working there. Everybody was complaining about the sous chef. He was a mess and made everything harder. He did like 50% of his responsibilities and had been complaining that he wasn't getting enough support. I was passionately spearheading the mission to get him fired, but he did not know this about me. He confided in me that he was going to tell on his supervisor, someone who works so hard, so much, and is a genuinely beloved boss. Knowing that almost everyone in the building was over him, and that he was about to go blame it on someone everybody loves was so exciting. He was fired a few days after he told me his plan. Chef's kiss. I went to work on a large government installation in a remote area. A woman I had never met filed a sexual harassment complaint against me. The fictitious event took place a year before I showed up there, and I had been 1,200 miles, 1,931 kilometers away. Thanks for watching. Share your stories in the comments.